My name's Andrew McPhail, and I'd like to really welcome you along to our seminar today. So the Australian Water School webinar, where we're looking at unlocking the full value of flood model. Okay, we've got several presenters today, so Sophia and William, which I'll introduce you to shortly, or they'll introduce themselves. But first, a little bit about me. My name's Andrew. I work with Jacobs. I've been doing flood modeling for a long time. And I don't know if you can remember your first flood. I was in my teens. I lived in a town called Dapto, about 2 hours drive south of Sydney in New South Wales. And we had a major flood. There was 400 millimeters of rainfall that occurred overnight. My local town was now an island. I had flooding north and south and east and west around this town. And I can remember my family taking for us for a drive and having a look in the flooding. So my bio in Australian on the website was saying I love water, but I don't necessarily love flooding. But I do enjoy looking at flooding. And little did I know, 4 years later, I was doing flood models in that same catchment. And since then, I've done flood models throughout Australia. But would you be able to recover your past flood models? What value were those old models that you did a number of years ago? Could they be useful? Are they an asset? There's some of the things that we're going to talk about today. So we've got people from all over the world coming to this seminar today. Was over 500 people registered. And if some people are from some of these countries, they're probably very late at night or early in the morning. So welcome along. Thank you for coming along and seeing this. What we're talking about today is applicable not only in Australia, but in all these different places around the world. So this is where I pass over to Sophia and Will. So everybody, please enjoy this seminar. Remember to ask questions throughout. Catch you later.
Thanks, Andrew. So I'm Sophia. I'm the flood products lead for ANZ for our flood products at Jacobs. Been here for about 8 months and so far loving the job. My background is in stormwater and flood modeling. I did that for about 10 years and then moved into product where I've done everything from kind of support, sales, to product development, where I've been a product manager and worked with software developers. But just like Andrew, I am very lucky, surrounded by beautiful waterways here in Tweed and Bundjalung country. But I also don't like flooding. I spent a long time doing flood models and looking at pretty blue flood maps until I saw my first flood flying back over from Perth into the Gold Coast years ago, and realised that flood maps should not be pretty blue colours. They should be brown, and floods are just not pretty. But before I hand over to Will, just special thanks to some people who contributed to the content of today's webinar. So Calvin Lee from Sydney Water, Melissa Daly from New South Wales SES, and Joe Clark from Jacobs in the UK. They all added some slides or some beautiful case studies on how they were managing their models, which I'll share with you shortly. So over to you, Will.
Thanks, Sophia, and welcome everybody. I'm really privileged to be here today. If I think about my flood journey, I started off nearly 20 years ago in local government, building flood models in software that doesn't even get used these days. And after about 12 and a half years in big and small local government, I made the switch over into the private consulting sector so that I could take that skills and knowledge and experience a little bit more broadly. And this year, I'm fortunate enough to have, joined as a director with my wife in our little boutique consulting company called UPRS, Urban Places Regional Spaces, where we partner with our clients to provide tailored and focused advice across flood risk management, natural hazards risk reduction, climate adaptation, community resilience, and environmental approvals. Outside of consulting, I'm the technical director for Floodplain Management Australia. I also sit on the committee for Engineers Australia's Queensland Water Panel. And I use flood models not just in understanding where water goes before an event. I've also got 2 national emergency medals in my involvement in flood response and recovery as well. So what I'm looking forward to contributing today is how that we can, as Sophia just said then, not just produce the pretty blue maps, but how we can build on the capability of flood models to enhance decision-making before, during, and after a flood event. Thanks, Sophia.
And if it couldn't get more impressive, Will, you're also the ABC radio flood expert, aren't you?
I do happen to get phone calls early in the morning or late at night, just like everyone joining this call today. I'm a big believer in providing the community with the best available information. So yes, I've done a few interviews during events, before events, to help people understand what they might expect during flood events. It's a really important part of what I do, and a part of what we do that I'm very, very passionate about. But enough about me. I suppose what I'd like to do before we get started is just reflect a little bit on who we have joining us on the call today. And Andrew pointed out that whilst this is the Australian Water School, our reach is far broader than just Australia. And we've got global attendance at today's webinar, which we're really, really impressed by, and really excited to share our knowledge and experience in this space. What I can see from everyone who provided their answers in that pre-webinar poll is that about half of the people on the webinar today are from the commercial consulting sector, with very strong representation as well from the government policy and planning space. And I'm really pleased to see you on this call in particular, because for me, this is what, if we treat our models well, we can get some really good data and information that supports that planning and policy making that we need to do. I can also see, I'm just looking at some of the responses here, that we've got people who build the flood models, review flood models, and make decisions based on those outputs. So that's really good. We've got that full spectrum of people that benefit from good quality flood models as well. And so what I'll do is at that point in time, I might just pop back to the agenda and what we want to cover off on today. And so we want to look at the value of a flood model. And as we'll cover, that's not just about how much does that flood model cost, but we also want to have a look at how we enhance the value of the investment that, as councils, agencies, organisations, might invest in those flood models. We're going to talk a little bit about current practices in model management, as well as the challenges in management methods that are applied when it comes to modelling, not just as flood models, but more broadly across a wide variety of industries that use models. And then we want to delve a little bit into how we can treat models as assets. And that's a bit that I'm very interested in exploring, with given my background in local government before joining the consulting world. And then I'm really excited to be able to hand over to Sophia to provide us a little bit of a live demonstration of how you might be able to manage your flood models more effectively and get the best value for money out of your flood models. And we're going to close, as Andrew said, with a little bit of a Q&A at the end. So certainly very happy to have you put those questions into the chat as we go through as well. So I guess at this point, I would just ask, if you haven't already, there's a poll that you can enter in, which is around what is the cost of the average flood model. And Sophia, I don't know if you would like to maybe give some guidance here on how people might think about responding to what a flood model might cost them.
Well, I was thinking lots of people on the call actually are flood models and building models. I'm sure the hours that we put into it, probably think that they're worth a lot more than and what we actually get paid for them. But yeah, just what are you charging for your flood models today? I know that we're obviously a global webinar today, but if you put it in your local currency, and then we can kind of extrapolate from there. But I've lost the poll results. If I'll let out. Perfect. So it looks like we've got a good portion of people that are doing flood models between $15,000 and $50,000. Not many are worth over $500,000, but there are a couple. And then quite a few people are doing kind of the small flood models under $15,000 too. So the cost of a flood model has changed. I was actually doing the modelling work, Will. So is that something that you're expecting, these numbers, or?
Yeah, look, I think, and I can see David White's just put a comment in the chat as well. There's a a great variety in what we use our flood models for these days. And I think it really depends on the scale of the flood model, which is David's point, and how detailed the calibration and how in-depth some of the flood estimation methods are that you're using when you build your flood model. And that can really dictate whether you're on the lower end of that spectrum that people have sort of said to the higher end of the spectrum as well. But there is certainly some efficiencies in how we go about developing up flood models where we can get the best bang for buck out of that investment. But Sophia, yeah, that probably is what I was expecting. Little site-based models might be less than 15,000, or very simplistic models in the less than 15,000, up to very complex whole of catchment Monte Carlo style flood models, which would be in that over 200 to over 500K value. So I guess it just goes to show that when we talk about flood model and flood modeling, there's a really large spectrum there in terms of the investment that various people, even just on this webinar, are putting into building those flood models to support decision making. So yeah, that's really interesting and probably what I expected to see. Awesome. And I might just carry on from there, Sophia. So when we talk about model cost, obviously that's what some people are paying for their models, but that doesn't necessarily equal the model value. And what I mean by that is that we can get a lot more out of our flood model if we design them correctly and if we put the right information into them. And obviously, the large cost in establishing a model is a one-off sort of cost, and that happens at the outset. But if we can think about how we might use that information at the end of the day, then we can design the scope and the specification of that flood model so that we can use it for a variety of reasons down the line. And I just thought it might be useful to introduce this concept, which I find to be quite useful when I'm talking about flood modeling and flood data and getting the most out of it. And it's called the Data Information Knowledge Wisdom Hierarchy, or the DIKW. And it was introduced in the mid to late 1980s within the information systems world. And it was to give some structure about how we approach the creation of data and then enhancing that and giving it the greatest value. And so I think this is really applicable, despite the fact that it just came out of a data science background, to what we do in the flood modeling space. And what it shows is that data is the foundation to how we create information, build our knowledge, and make wise decisions. And so when we look at this hierarchy, it is really what you see at the bottom is taking data like LiDAR, like bathymetry, like land use information, and how by giving it context, we can create information, in this particular instance, around things like flood behavior and flood characteristics. But that's not where the buck stops, as we might say here in Australia. Because whilst flood data and flood modeling gives us good information, there is more value to be had in the investment in flood modeling. And that is by understanding and giving meaning to that information, we can start to build our knowledge about how flooding impacts our infrastructure, how it impacts our communities, and then with the insights and partnering with our decision makers and our community, we can get down into really good risk-informed investment in infrastructure, investment in those planning and policy decisions, and helping to enhance our community resilience and to reduce the disaster risk profile of our communities. So I thought I would start when we talk about the value of a flood model in providing this hierarchy, because to me, we can't make decisions based on data alone. And as flood modelers, we have probably heard the term garbage in, garbage out. We need good data as the foundation for ultimately the application of that information into good knowledge and wise decision making. And so I just thought that when we go and build flood models, it's very useful to have that context in mind. And when we're talking about the value of flood models, when we get up into the top part, to the pointy end of that pyramid, What we're talking about is how we can apply that information into everyday decision making. And again, I can see from the poll answers and your responses to the poll that we had a lot of people who are attending today who are making decisions, making policy, planning for the future based on the information that comes out of those flood models. And so here are some examples of how we can use our flood models, whether that be through policy and planning, mapping of flood risk as that supports emergency management or land use planning, whether we look at flood management across the floodplain or infrastructure and site design from a stormwater perspective. And perhaps, Sophia, I'd certainly welcome your thoughts there. As you said, your background is from stormwater modelling perspective as well. If there's anything that you wanted to pop in there, I'll certainly take that at this point as well.
I think you've got it covered, Will.
All right, great, perfect. And I'm just looking at some of the questions that are coming through as we're going on, Sophia, and I see those. I think that we will definitely cover off on some of those really great questions there at the back end of it. But in the first instance, Sophia, I might pass it back to you to talk around the current practices in model management.
Okay, thanks, Will. And it's interesting that the triangle you kind of showed of the hierarchy of what you can get out of these things is very similar to what they use in water and sewer with the digital twin and the digital transformation is the more details you go and the closer you get to the representation, the quality of the data, the more you can use the models, for operations and making operational decisions. But over to current practices. So if you think that I'm kind of making it a bit of a stretch to call this current practices in model management, you would probably be right. But we've got to start somewhere. So at the start of this presentation, I kind of said that, I've been hands-off modeling and reviewing models and being, hands-on for years now. But one of the great things about my job is I get to talk to so many different people that are in this industry from so many different organizations and understand how they do things. And unfortunately, things haven't really changed since I was on the tools. So flood models really just kind of, in general, get done like this. We gather the data, we build a model. Hopefully, we document the versions and decisions that we've made along the way, hopefully. We get that model reviewed, hopefully. We put a couple of flood maps in a PDF report. We get the report reviewed. We hand over the report, and then hopefully we also hand over the model, which is usually done on an encrypted hard drive or using a share site or email. And then, sadly, the models usually get left to gather some dust. And interestingly, I was looking at property to buy this morning, so I looked on the council website that I used to work for to see what stormwater upgrades were happening in the area. And believe it or not, they were planning on constructing what I had planned and modelled over 10 years ago. And it made me wonder, is the model that I built at the time thing they're being used today to make sure that they're constructing the right thing now in today's climate? Or did it get gathered dust and put in the bin, and perhaps someone spent money rebuilding something? And of course, this is just general. There's lots of people doing great things, which I'll share in a minute. But the challenges with the way that we do things today is we don't get the value out of them. So we lose the source data or knowledge transfer. So the knowledge about a modelling and the area is generally held with some person who built that model. Multiple copies and versions, as everyone knows, _final. Time wasted finding models. So I see this a lot with people that are reviewing models or perhaps working on joint ventures and collaborating with other people. It's the seniors who are reviewing the models, who are the expensive ones, that spend a lot of time trying to find the right model files. And then because there's a lack of consistency in the naming conventions and the structure, they spend a lot of time trying to understand that model as well. We get wrong results or a mismatch of the results from the model compared to the report. So because flood model results such large data storage requirements, we usually don't keep those. So we rerun the model when we're reviewing things or where we need those outputs. And then often you'll see that the results don't actually match the report, which is the problem. or the simulations don't run at all, which is what the screenshot is on the right side using a file. We lose models, and then if the hard drives become corrupted or get lost, we lose them as well. And then all of that leads to expensive model rebuilds. So the way we're doing things today, we're really treating models as a tool to answer certain questions. And I saw somewhere in the chat that, there's concerns about using flood models outside the reasons that they were built for. I totally understand that. Doesn't mean that we should just throw them out. We should definitely consider why we're using them and what they've been built for. But we shouldn't just throw them out because, they've been used for that one purpose. And so when we use them as a tool to answer these questions, and hopefully they get that as a minimum. But if we throw that out afterwards, we've kind of lost any future value. And if you are a modeler on the call, you know how much time and effort and energy goes into building those models. Personally, before I had a child, they were my baby. My models were my babies. And you treated like that. So to see them not get used for full potential of this is a bit sad. Probably a bit sad that I treated flood models as my babies too. But hopefully there's a brighter future as we start treating models as assets. And I'll hand it back over to you, Will.
Thanks, Sophia. I think we can all be guilty for thinking that our flood models are our babies. I know that a lot of our wonderful flood modeling engineers spend a lot of time making sure they grow up to be the best version of themselves. So there's probably a lot of similarities there. One of the things that I wanted to cover off when you say, so what does the brighter future look like, is we do a lot of work with our clients in trying to understand. I just want to loop back to that question that's in the Q&A about using models beyond what they're intended for it. And so we do a lot of work with our clients in terms of thinking about what those intended uses will be, because it is a really valid point that we need to think about whether they are fit for purpose. And that's a really important term for me when I'm looking at flood models and then trying to translate that information to support decision-making. And I think part of the challenge and why that question get answered is because so often we are just treating our flood models as the bits and bytes that they are made up of. It is an answer to the question that we have right here and now without thinking about more broadly, what could this flood model be used for? And often that's because of budget constraints. That's because of lack of resourcing that exists in councils as well. And so when I think about treating models as assets, some of the things that I think about is around the characteristics of those flood models. And some of those characteristics I've just popped up on the screen because if we can change how we look at what a flood model is, and as Sophia said, start thinking of it as an asset, not just as a tool. It's not a shovel, it's a whole shed of machinery. That what we can do is we can start to look at how we might be able to fund, maintain, interact, and rectify our models. And so when we think about flood models, yes, they are made of bits and bytes. They are physical. They have a measurable cost, and we've already covered that off thanks to everyone's responses to the poll. We know that there is significant investment by our various agencies, organisations and government entities that build these flood models to keep them up to date and keep, them usable as time progresses. And we know that the average lifespan of a flood model in Australia is around sort of that 7 to 8 years before you have to go back and start from scratch and refeed it all of that good data as the base information, as the foundation for deriving our flood information in our various catchments and drainage corridors. We understand that flood models support decision making, and we had around 30% of the people on this call today who use flood models for that purpose. And we know that over time they decrease in value. The reason that I put these characteristics forward is because these are also the characteristics of a capital asset or capital expenditure. And we know that sometimes finding funding from models can be on the low priority for our organizations and our agencies and government bodies. But if you think about how much you spend on roads and pipes and creating infrastructure, if we look at our flood models as assets, then there is a pathway for considering our flood models as having a capital value as well. And so that opens the door up to helping us to understand and maintain our models in a far more user fit for purpose standard. And I think that that's ultimately the goal that we want to do. And this kind of framing and the consideration of flood models as assets is not, standalone, a new concept that I have. It's about having a look at how other industries treat their models, treat how they make decision making. And so I would suggest, if you're having a look at these characteristics of flood models and say, oh, yeah, they look like the flood models that I create as well, then we open up the opportunity for us to consider our flood models as capital assets, which can be a positive when we consider flooding. Funding of flood models. Not for everyone, and obviously there's operational expenditure that needs to go to fund the resources and the officers and the very technical, the users of these models. But sometimes the barriers to enhancing the overall fit for purpose nature and the ability to use our flood models to answer multiple questions is constrained by budget. And so I put this forward as a framework, perhaps of opening doors for additional funding. That's just from my experience in local government, Sophia, but maybe if I hand it over to you, there's some other, learnings that we can look across the industries where we could leverage how they treat their models to maybe leverage what we do with our flood models as well.
Thanks, Will. And, the old modeler in me is saying, does that mean that we're all going to get pay rises, Will? But you're right. I think, the last 4 years I spent working with Innovise and Autodesk, where I worked across both water utilities and kind of stormwater and flooding. And one of the benefits of that is I got it was a steep learning curve learning how things that get done in the sewer side. But, I could show and what was going on in the water space. Flooding can learn from that. And interestingly, the sewer guys, I could actually help them understand AR&R. So there was a bit of a cross-pollination with that, which doesn't happen in Australia a lot. And I think we don't have combined systems here like other parts of the world, apart from a couple of little locations. But so definitely the sewer, like the water utilities, the sewer models and the water models, they treat them like gold. I know water utilities in the UK that have their models, their network models, insured for tens of billions of pounds. Which I don't know if that happens in Australia. I haven't heard about it. Certainly buildings, everyone's heard of BIM, Building Information Model, which is essentially 3D data capture of the buildings and all the content inside it. And that can be used, buildings have been seen to understand the benefits of having that data so that they can better maintain those assets. And something that, I'm very, very aware of is software development. And, we actually, as software developers, we spend a lot of money on products and other software programs to manage our software, our source data. Very much like network modelers and flood modelers is software developers kind of move around. They all have their own unique ways of building their code and kind of understanding their code and writing it. And it's really important for software companies to document that, version control it, make sure that it's in a single location that everyone can access so that if a developer leaves, someone else can come in and pick that code up rather than having to rebuild a whole product. Could you imagine if software companies saved their source code on a hard drive in someone's storage on their desk? It would be an absolute nightmare. You couldn't run like that. So I think, certainly the flood industry could learn from these other engineering industries. And something that they all have in common is the way they treat their models. So they have systematic data collection. Sewer network models are updated every 3 to 5 years. They create new data, they recalibrate, and they work on that same network model to improve it. They don't throw it out every 5 years. and start again, they incrementally improve it. And one of the benefits of that is, we all make mistakes. They might be small. And even if we make small mistakes, if we are incrementally improving and working on the same models, we can fix those mistakes. But if you throw it out and start again, then you're going to make new mistakes and they're not going to get picked up. They all have a single point of truth, which is version controlled. So sewer water network modeling often is done in software packages that actually do this for them. They're all well documented and they have consistent data structures and naming conventions. So it's not all bad in the flood industry, but certainly things are done a lot more consistently in other industries. But some good news stories, and I'm going to get my notes out here because these are slides that are being provided for other people. I want to do them justice. And these examples kind of could have their own webinar, but obviously I'm short on time, so I'll run through them quickly. But the New South Wales Flood Data Portal, it's administered by the Geospatial Intelligence team of New South Wales SES. One sec, I'm not sure I do this justice. They do that on behalf of the New South Wales Flood Data Access Board. And if you haven't seen this before, if you don't work in New South Wales, maybe you haven't, you can find it on Google. You just put in the New South Wales Flood Data Portal. So you can go through the SEED website as well. But it's open to everyone. You can add your own registration as long as it's a kind of a corporate email address, not a Hotmail. You can access it. And then from 2017 onwards, all of the data that was uploaded into the flood portal is publicly accessible. So there are some that require special licensing and you need to contact the owners. But generally, there's a lot of great data out there. And that doesn't just include flood reports. So we've got flood models in there, hydrology models, reports, all sorts of data sets, results. And this was created because the New South Wales SES kind of realised that there was a need for government, floodplain managers and industry professionals to be able to work on a single source, be able to collaborate and to provide easy access to all of this information. So there's two ways to search for data through the portal. You can actually just do a text search. You can also do a location search, which is nice. And there's really nice filters as well. You can kind of go through and have a look at kind of open data and filter on reports or models. And I stumbled across this because I was looking for kind of open data for flood model examples. They didn't just do this out of the goodness of their heart, I think. There was a little bit of self-requirements there. So they do use the data, they kind of translate it into the portal that's used for the New South Wales Strategic Flood Database, which is government use only. And they use that information. It's really important when they're planning and preparedness processes in emergency response. So things like community emergency warnings. And that database that's for the government actually includes historical data as well, collected from the New South Wales SES after the major operation periods, which they have just come out of, I believe. So if you haven't checked that out, pop on, have a look. It's a great website, I think. And if you are working in New South Wales, make sure you go and check the portal. If you're working in an area, see if there's already something available. That's what it's there for. And if you are doing work in New South Wales council areas, make sure that they're uploading the data so that everyone else can access it. So moving away from Australia for a moment, another example of great flood model management is the England's National Flood Risk Assessment. And if you're at FMA last month, you might have seen my colleague Petra Neve present on this in a little bit more detail. It really does deserve its own webinar. But essentially what it is it's updated national flood mapping on a 2-meter grid resolution for the entire country across lots of different scenarios and climate change factors. But the way they built it, it was a scalable cloud computing system that makes the best makes the best use of the available information from the EA and other models that are out there from the local authorities. And then underneath that, they have, I think, 650 terabytes worth of national flood modeling. to kind of close the gaps between the existing local models and to make sure that they have a whole picture of flood risk across the country. And the way they built that actually took 5 years to do. They've only just kind of wrapped it up, I believe. Took 5 years to do, and they've built it in a way that allows them to update it really easily. So you can imagine doing this across a whole country, lots of different agencies providing models in lots of different software and formats. They really had to manage that well so that they could update it easily. And they're planning on doing that every 3 to 6 months, which is cool because models get updated often. And so we should be using the latest information. So to give you a quick example of what that looks like, there's the country. It does overlap neighbouring countries a little bit, which is good. And if we zoom in there, you can see this is a 1 square kilometre grid. So each 1 square kilometre is kind of processed separately when you draw a flood area, and it looks at the best available information. It will do some smarts in the back end to interpolate if it doesn't find what you need. And then it kind of stitches all of that information back together and provides this really nice high resolution 2-meter grid flood risk map. And there you go, the pretty blues. They haven't learnt from my experience in the aircraft. But yeah, so that's across the country, and they're doing that, updating it. It's really nice. A little bit different to kind of flood model management because it's a little bit more about kind of the data. And I know there's good examples in Australia of managing the flood data as well. And the last one here is from Sydney Water, and I only learnt about this last week, and it's become my favourite example actually, because I think it's just so robust, and it's something like I've never seen before in managing flood models. So it was a model management system. They call it the model Provenance system for a single project. And some of the reasons why they developed this system for a single project in Sydney Water is it was a model that covered the entire Hawkesbury Nepean catchment area. And it included lots of different components, including water quality. So they really needed something that allowed an easy interface between source and two-flow FC to provide a whole catchment model. Can't speak from personal experience, but I've heard that it can be a little bit fiddly interfacing between the two, similar to kind of our hydrology products in fifth flow. And so they needed to make sure that that was kind of managed really well. They also had 8 modelers across plus 5 consultants working on the model at any one time. And the model went through over 10 iterations and versions during the build, calibration, and validation process. So lots of different versions, lots of different methodologies, all kind of being pulled in together. And then they were also running 5 to 8 scenarios on each model, which took a week to simulate each. And so you can imagine the amount of data that was being kind of processed there. So they built this Provenance system, which has its own knowledge base, which I've never heard of a flood model having its own knowledge base, which is quite really cool. But they use Confluence for that. They also track their tasks inside Jira, which these are all kind of software development tools that we use. They had archiving and version control of the models through Bitbucket, so making sure that they were always working on the latest version. And plus, they have an interactive result viewing visualization tool in Power BI. So the outcome, although they had a few lessons learned of things that they wouldn't do again, essentially the project gave them what they were after, which was security and traceability, the flexibility, and the integration with cloud services. And they have that thorough knowledge base so that if a modeler leaves or wants to go and work on a different project, they have all of that tracked so that they can go back and make sure that, knowledge transfer is happening. All right. So that's all kind of the case studies. And what I thought I would do is quickly show you, I won't try and take too much time, but just show you what we've been working on at Jacobs and give you a live demonstration of Flood Platform. Before I do that, I'll just give you a bit of an overview of what Flood Platform is. So Jacobs is one of the biggest engineering firms in the world, and we are not short of flood modelling or flood modelling teams inside Jacobs. There's lots of flood modelling done. Even though I'm not part of the team, Andrew actually is. He's the lead in Brisbane. I sit with those teams. I talk to them a lot because they speak my language. So I certainly know a lot of modeling is being done. Jacobs identified these problems with kind of lost models and knowledge transfer years ago. So inside Jacobs, we actually built a model management system that was really designed for modelers to be able to manage their data. We did that 15 years ago. And when I say we, not me, I wasn't around, but my team did. They built a system for managing the models, making sure that we didn't lose any models, and also making sure that we could spread simulations across the globe over our resources that we had. So that's been working really well, and it's used on majority of our flood modeling projects, but it does fall short in a few areas. So because it's an internal tool, we can't collaborate with others outside of the organization. And the other part is kind of flood models are versioned and stored inside Jacobs, but once we hand them over, or once, if we're working with another organization, kind of that version control is broken. And so then we end up with multiple copies, and then, keeping track of all of that information. So what we wanted to do with Flood Platform is kind of make it a cloud solution for one, and allow it to be something that everyone can use no matter which organization you're from, so that we can collaborate together and manage our models together. Okay, so I'll just pull up Flood Platform. Right, so this is Flood Platform. As you can see, it's a SaaS program, so it's just web-based. All you need is a login. And what we have is a global view. So depending on how you work and what you're doing, this may or may not be useful for you. It's certainly useful for Jacobs. But I'll just show you. So I'll put the Melbourne office in. There we go. You can just do a search there. Right, so you can see the Melbourne CBD there. And if I just turn on the projects that are around the area, I can zoom out here and you can see that there's lots of different projects that are happening across Melbourne or have happened across Melbourne. And I can click on one of these and get a bit of information about that project. I can even drop down and have a look. Okay, well, there's some models actually available in this area. And obviously this wouldn't happen straight away. This happens over time as you build in your management system. But then you can go in there, so you control click in your web, you get a new view, which is nice. You can see your models and then you can go in and have a look at some details there. Obviously, I'm not going to go and show you details of a real model. I'll flip over to a demo model into the same space. So this is a model in New South Wales that my colleague built as a demo model. Essentially what we can do is we can add a new project in here or a new model. This is something that's used globally, not so much in Australia, I don't think, but we can set the kind of source, give it a description. And if I wanted to do that, then I can go and upload a model. And we support all kind of zip files. So, 7-zip. You just package up your whole model once you're finished. So we're not a replacement of your existing tools. We are just a model management system, and you can run things if you want to, but mostly model management. You get your model, you upload it, and it will set your versions for you and give you the dates that it's been changed and uploaded, so you always know that which version is the latest version. You also get the status here. So Flood Platform does some smart things when you upload a model. So it does some processing. So it actually goes through and looks at all the files that you have and makes sure that you have everything in your model that you need to produce the results that you have, or to be able to run the simulation if you don't have results. Because as I mentioned, the last thing you want to do is find that you don't have the results that you need, don't have the files that you need to run the model. So you can also go into the model. Actually, before I go there, I can go back one. So you can actually provide permissions on your models. Right. So, for example, if I was going to work with you, I can put your email address in. See how good my memory is. Is that it? Hopefully. Right, do I have, yeah, good. I can invite you here. Oh, doesn't like it. Right, you have to add a real person. Right, so after I added Will to this, I can give him different permission levels. Right, so if I just want to be a viewer, he can't really do anything but view the model. But if I wanted him to be able to actually access the model, provide comments, download the model, upload models, then I can make him a member there. So there you go, Will. I've given you access to our demo model.
Awesome.
Right. So once we do that, we could go back into the model. Will could come in here, exact same location. He would see the model available on his organization, and he can go and export it if he wants to, make changes. Or maybe he wants to go and, me or him or Adam, we want to go in and have a look what's happened. So as it's processed, you can see that even though it's processed and found majority of the files to run the simulations, it has given us some checks. So there's some files that have been missing from the model. And whoever created this model in the first place should really go back and make sure that these files exist before they hand a model over. We can also have a look at the model files, right? So one thing that's really nice about Flood Platform is you don't need all the modeling software and all the modeling tools to be able to view model files and results. So we've used all the really nice color coding here. You can have a look at the model inputs. You can also have a look at, your CFV files, and soon you'll be able to look at your shape files as well, or your mid-NIF files if you're MapInfo users. And then you can also have a look at the results. So depending on what you've uploaded, if you just uploaded the model without results, you'll get a list of simulations here, which you can run. So you can see here, one's starting to initialize here. If you already have the results, you'll see the results available already for you. Right. So once you go into result, you kind of get a nice summary view of the model results, what's happened, and the simulation health. So we did a webinar a couple of months ago about kind of understanding simulation health and how a healthy simulation doesn't mean a good model. So if you're interested, go back and check that out. But you can see here, straight away that this is a healthy model, that the flood's receding. It's run all the way through. You kind of get some details of what's been used. You can also have a look at the log files. So if you're a nerd, a modeling nerd and like to look at the log files, you can. We've also put in some kind of troubleshooting, mostly for ourselves really, but to help with working out if the simulation fails, what's actually happened during the process. And then you can also view the results. Right. So inside Flood Platform, we've kind of got two options. You can use the map view or the aerial view, depending on your choice. And the results tab, I think, is kind of built for modelers and non-modelers, right? So it's pretty self-explanatory. You get 1D elements and you get your results. So you can either step through the results and kind of, you can play the flood simulation. You can see the water through the river network there. You can also add the maximums. And if you wanted to, you can also plot kind of 1B results. So this is all kind of allowing people to collaborate on results, view things without having to kind of open up QGIS or opening up CSVs in Excel. It's really just a quick, easy access to this information. So you can see the flows and the water levels there. If you're a modeler or you're doing reviews and you want a little bit more information, you can click on the Models tab. And then this is not a full list of things that we're going to be showing, but you can turn on your code layers. We've got the cross sections there of the model. You can also put in your boundary conditions there, right? So you can see that I've got some inflows and this is the downstream outflow. So you can check all of the information there. So you can also, my webinars are covering my view. One sec. Oh.
Sophia, while you're looking for something, just note the time.
Yes, I think I've got 10 minutes left. Yep. but I will definitely leave a couple minutes question. I'm nearly finished. So when you've got your results, you can also export them, right? So you can just draw a section if you need to go to a meeting. I don't know why you wouldn't just take your iPad or your laptop here. But you can also make comments. And so this is one of the nice things is, I just added Will to this workspace. So he could come in and have a look and make some comments. And then I could see those comments straight away and kind of get back to him without having to kind of do a Teams call and, step through the model. There's kind of that transfer acknowledged straight away. You can see here, my team have been playing around with the demo model. So that was pretty much it. That's what I really wanted to show. So, this is what Jacobs internally are working towards, but, moving away from kind of just the internal system that has 70% of the benefits of a model management system to kind of this full collaborative space where we can all work together. Right. I will move back to my slide deck. Thank you, Andrew, for the timing. And we're at the questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Will and Sophia. You're not out of it yet. You'll still have some questions to answer over the next little while. I am going to try my best to use the questions that were in the Q&A chat. Now, Will, you just answered a question that I thought was I haven't seen your answer, but you just answered it. Sorry, where was that one?
Was it about valuing the model based on the avoided losses? Why can't we value a model based on it? And it's a great question, isn't it, Andrew? It's a really good question. And so for everybody else, if you want to just have a look in the Q&A, the question was around why can't we value our models based on the losses or the impact that they help us to avoid by having a good model? Because certainly a bad model will mean that we end up in a situation where we make bad decisions and put people at risk. So where's the incentive for investing in good models? And I think it's a great question. Unfortunately, and this came to another question that was within the chat earlier, is that the way that a lot of the time that our accounting systems are set up is that we don't get to value our assets based on the unrealized benefit that they provide. It is inherent within the model. I would love to see a situation where we could consider things like avoided losses and co-benefits being considered when we look to value, assuming that we can treat our models as our flood models as assets into the future. I think that would be where we would get the real incentive and reward for thinking broadly about the possible uses for our model and not just creating more and more models. As I said, that's why I really like that data, information, knowledge, wisdom hierarchy, Andrew, because too often I have seen a model being created next to another model, created next to another model. And unfortunately, that just means cost. It doesn't mean value. And if we took a more holistic view of where we might be needing to use that information in the future, then we can start moving to not just creating more data, but building on that to make better decisions, wiser decisions, and creating better knowledge about some behavior.
Yeah, so
I was going to mention, I have strangely been getting these calls from people doing like little one lot subdivisions, and they're doing it, next to a river, and they want some flood modeling done. Thank you, marketing team, for generating those leads. But what I find interesting is, they call up and they're like, Sophia, we need flood modeling done. Can you get us a price? And, obviously you'd want to go and see if there's flood modeling done already. But if there is, for a competent modeler or engineer, you can quickly convert those models into something usable. But if you have to start from scratch, it's going to cost the developers and the poor parents that are just kind of, adding a granny flood or something onto their lot a lot of money. So certainly, by managing these models, we can get a lot more out of the data.
Okay, so we're definitely raising the question that considering our models as an asset, not just something we put on the shelf and let get dusty. But there was an interesting question raised about AI in our flood models. I'm not sure if it's exactly a question that we've covered today, but Will or Sophia, any quick questions for that?
Yeah, look, I think I think AI and machine learning can provide a role in perhaps preparing some information. So there was a question that I know that we had, Andrew, which was around land use classification. I've certainly seen machine learning being used in spatial information systems to be able to classify land use based on vegetation type and natural vegetation density index as well. So I think there is a role to play. I'm a scientist and engineer at heart. I haven't crossed that bridge of moving away from physics as the basis for hydrodynamic models. And I think that for me, that is where the most defendable, robust answers come from. So for me, I'm not comfortable with AI or machine learning being the engine at the core of flood modeling, but I think that there is a role that can have in maybe some of the ancillary supporting functions. I think with all things at this point in time with AI and machine learning is it can go to a point, but you still need the human to be checking it at the end of it.
I agree with that, Will, but I'm not as cautious as you maybe because I've been in the tech space a little bit longer, the engineering space. But I've definitely seen, maybe 5-10 years ago, we dabbled in it. And one of the problems is that AI is really good at things that it's seen before. But when you're kind of developing areas and things are changing or we get floods that we haven't seen before, it's no good. But, what I've seen recently is a colleague of mine who has just done a presentation, he did a PhD on it, is looking at taking kind of broad flood models and using those to predict futures and kind of drilling down and making a coarse, easy to run flood model, using that lots of times learning from that, and then being able to use that to run kind of very fast, rapid assessments. And I think that's, in forecasting, there's definitely a place for that. I don't know if we have it exactly right yet, but I don't think that's going to be far away.
Okay, thank you. Yes, a bit of work being done by a particular colleague of ours in Melbourne. Okay, I'm just going through the list of questions. There's a number that we're not going to be able to get through. Will, is there any particular ones you want to dabble at?
I just note that Jonathan just jumped into the chat to say physics-informed neural networks comes in to ensure that the equations underlying the flood models can see it so that we can use the AI to make that more efficient. And I'll certainly take Jonathan in that space. He's far more well-informed than I am. So great to see that comment there as well. There's a lot there. I think what we might do, Andrew, is I'm quite happy to take some of these questions and we'll get some answers to these people after the webinar and just circle back around and close out. So there's I think a lot of very good questions in there and a lot of obviously experience of people that I can see with their own personal dealings with having to manage and maintain flood models. So yeah, we might circle afterwards for me.
Okay. We do want to wrap up because it's just after 11, but Sophia, you did have exactly what I was thinking about. So there was a few questions about flood platform. So if people want to scan that and jump into that website, you can definitely have a look at what there is available, and I'm sure there'll be links there if you wanted to send questions to the flood platform team. Okay, and then there's another slide. Okay, so thank you very much for attending. I hope that it was beneficial for you, and there'll be many different organizations that you're part of that you may be actually asking the question, how do I view my model and what am I going to do with it once I've finished with it? So there is going to be a recording that you'll get links to soon. There'll also be a certificate of attendance for those who need it. And as you close out of this meeting, there will be a feedback survey that comes up. So if you can spare a minute just to go through that, it'd be great to give feedback for the presenters, but also for AWS. And thank you very much for coming along. You see there is a scan me code there. That is part of the survey. Yeah, that's a quick way into the survey as well. Well, thank you very much for all your attendance, and we'll call it a close now.